Hi, crafty folks. Amy here with Amy's Wares, and I have some pre-batched whatnots and rainbow goodness to share with you. So this box, which formerly identified as a chocolate box, isn't it pretty, contains a ton of previously made card panels. So sometimes I just want to try a new technique, but don't necessarily want to finish a card, or maybe I make a bunch of panels and only turn a couple of them into a card, and here enters my chocolate box. So I have tons of panels pretty much ready to go, some even die cut like this one with a pretty stitched edge, and that's what I'm going to use today for this quick and easy rainbow card. Now here's a photo of the finished card to show you the direction that we're headed, but ultimately if I'm looking at this panel and trying to guess how I made it, I think I used Catherine Pooler re-inkers. So you could do like a Catherine Pooler or any dye ink pad and smush it and use like a water brush pen or like a watercolor brush and some water. Or I think in this case I probably just used the re-inker, kind of like a liquid watercolor medium, and just created this very simple brush stroke rainbow across the panel of watercolor paper. So this watercolor paper is, I'm guessing it's probably Arteza. I do have two different types of watercolor paper in my crafty stash. One is kind of nicer, but not super expensive, and then one is a little bit less expensive. So my nicer one is Arteza, like professional grade, I think it's called, and the other one is Canson XL. So I believe this one, based on the tooth and the texture, which you can see it's being a little difficult to stamp, is the Arteza one. And it does have a stitched edge rectangle die that I would have cut down slightly smaller than A2 size, with a paper rose stitched edge rectangle die. So I will link whatever products I think I used in the video description box below. So if you expand and scroll down, you'll find those details. But this stamp is really cool because it can say "Oh joy," it can say "Enjoy," it can say "Joy," and I just stamped it as many times as I could, but it did still show some of that texture through. Now I knew with this being a pigment ink, the black rich pigment ink, that I was going to stick my finger in it and smear it, because that's what I do. So to avoid this, I decided to just coat it real quick with some icicle clear embossing powder from Brutus Monroe, and then just hit it with my heat tool, because I know with as many times as I stamped that was going to be wet forever days, and I don't need to be smearing it and ruining that card. That would have really frustrated me. So to save myself the hassle, I decided to just go this extra step and heat emboss it with clear. So you could let it sit and be patient, which I am not, or you could use your heat tool and just dry the black pigment ink, or in this case just coat it real quick, give it a little bit of shine with a clear embossing powder, and those are all ways that you can avoid smearing slow to dry black pigment ink and ruining your project and getting ink all over the place. So this worked out well. I'm oftentimes just too lazy, honestly, to bust out embossing powder, but it worked really well in this case. So here I have a little scrap. Actually, it was I think it even had a stamp on the other side. It was a little sentiment strip. Actually, it wasn't even a sentiment strip. It was just a little strip of cardstock. But it was on my desk, and it was the perfect width to use the sub-sentiment. So I'm basically going to turn this into what will likely be a birthday card. So I'm just going to freehand stamp this with that same black pigment ink, mindful not to stick my finger in it. And then I will just trim it down and put some little foam strips. I get these from Amazon, and they're perfect to go behind sentiment strips. So I'm just going to pop that up a little bit, put it right on this panel. So it's your day, enjoy. And then I will attach this watercolor panel to a card base of 120-pound accent opaque, and that is in US A2 size 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 that I will attach it to. Now here you can see I'm using some tear tape just because watercolor paper is pretty thick, and it can get a little unruly and warpy, especially since I did use the heat tool with it. So I'm using my picky tool to pull off this backer, just so I don't have to fiddle with it for 8 years and keep you here all day. But this will hold this panel down nice and tight to this card base without warping it. So That's what I'm doing here, just lining it up so the margins are nice and even. Now, watercolor paper does tend to be more cream. I don't mind that it's not a perfect match. Plus, I also have the sentiment, which matches the outside, just to kind of tie that together. But if that bothers you, then maybe, I don't know, use some ink or something around the border just to tie in another color, or maybe have it cover the whole card front. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please hit the thumbs up, and I will catch you next time. Bye.